The alarm should have gone off at 5:30. Grayson Thatcher knew this because he checked it 3 times before falling asleep, his mind already rehearsing the presentation that could change everything. Instead, he woke to small fingers pressing against his cheek and a whispered voice cutting through the darkness of his bedroom. "Daddy, is today your big day?" Isla stood beside his bed in her unicorn pajamas, her blonde curls wild from sleep, clutching the stuffed dolphin she'd named Mr. Whiskers. The digital clock on the nightstand glowed 6:15, 45 minutes past when he should have been in the shower. Already reviewing his notes while coffee brewed in the kitchen of their cramped 2-bedroom apartment. His heart lurched. The phone sat silent on the nightstand screen, dark alarm disabled by some glitch or his own exhausted fumbling the night before. He sat up too fast, the room tilting slightly, adrenaline flooding his system as the reality settled over him like cold water. "We overslept, sweetheart." Her eyes widened. "But you have to show your ideas to the whole company. Even the Queen Lady." The Queen Lady, Isla's name for Victoria Ashford, the CEO of Meridian Enterprises, the woman whose face Grayson had studied in company newsletters and industry magazines for 2 years, without ever speaking a single word to her. The woman who would sit at the head of the conference table in exactly 3 hours deciding whether his strategy deserved a chance or whether he'd remain just another mid-level marketing strategist drowning in a sea of cubicles and unrealized potential. He kissed Isla's forehead and threw back the covers. The apartment's thin walls let in sounds from the neighboring units' morning routines already in full swing, the building coming alive around them. Mrs. Rodriguez upstairs ran water for her shower. The college students next door played music too loud for a Tuesday morning. Life continued at its normal pace while Grayson's carefully constructed schedule disintegrated. The kitchen was exactly as he'd left it the night before, cleaned and ready for the morning rush. He started the coffee maker with shaking hands, the machine gurgling to life as he pulled Isla's favorite cereal from the cabinet. The box felt too light. He'd meant to buy more groceries after the presentation, after he knew whether the promotion would come through and whether he could finally afford to stock the pantry without counting every dollar twice. Isla climbed onto one of the mismatched chairs they'd found at a yard sale 3 years ago when Vivian had first left and Grayson had been scrambling to furnish an apartment on a salary that barely covered rent and childcare. The table wobbled slightly under her elbows, one leg shorter than the others, despite his attempts to fix it with folded cardboard. "Tell me about the Queen Lady." Grayson poured cereal into her bowl, the few remaining flakes barely covering the bottom. He added milk and set it in front of her, buying himself time to think. "How did you explain a CEO to a 6-year-old? How did you describe a woman who'd built an empire from nothing, who commanded boardrooms and million-dollar accounts, who made grown executives nervous with a single glance?" "She's very important, very busy, very smart. Is she nice?" The question caught him off guard. He'd never considered it before whether Victoria Ashford possessed anything as simple as niceness. Everything he knew about her came from press releases and company memos, carefully crafted public statements that revealed nothing about the person underneath the polished exterior. "I don't know, sweetheart. I've never met her." Isla spooned cereal into her mouth, thinking this over with the seriousness she applied to all important matters. "In my books, queens are usually nice, even when they look scary." The coffee finished brewing and Grayson poured himself a cup, black, no sugar. The liquid burned his throat, but the pain felt grounding, pulling him back from the edge of panic. He had 2 hours and 45 minutes to shower, dress, get Isla ready for school, wait for Mrs. Donnelly to arrive, and make it across town to the office before the presentation began. 2 hours and 45 minutes to save his career. The shower ran cold after 3 minutes, the building's ancient water heater unable to keep up with morning demand. Grayson endured it, letting the icy spray wash away the last remnants of sleep. Through the thin bathroom door, he could hear Isla singing to herself, making up words to a melody she'd learned at school. The sound made his chest tighten. She deserved better than this apartment with its temperamental plumbing and paper-thin walls. She deserved a bedroom that didn't double as storage for his office supplies, a neighborhood with good schools instead of the district that kept threatening budget cuts, a father who could afford to buy her new shoes when the old ones pinched her toes instead of stuffing tissue paper in the fronts to make them last another month. His only suit hung in the closet, dry cleaned yesterday at a cost that had made him wince. The fabric felt crisp against his skin as he buttoned the shirt, knotted the tie, checked his reflection in the mirror above the dresser. The man staring back looked tired despite the expensive haircut he'd splurged on last week. 35 years old and already showing gray at the temples, lines forming around his eyes from too many late nights, working after Isla went to bed hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table while the city sounds filtered through the windows. Isla appeared in the doorway wearing her school uniform, the skirt a little too short because she'd grown 2 inches since September, and new uniforms cost money he didn't have. She'd attempted to brush her hair, leaving it half-tamed, half-wild. Grayson knelt and helped her fix it, his fingers gentle as he worked through the tangles. "You're wearing your special cologne." Her observation skills remained too sharp for comfort. "Am I? You only wear it for important things, like parent-teacher conferences. And that time we went to Aunt Marie's wedding." He couldn't argue with her logic. The cologne had been a gift from Vivian, back when they'd still been married, back when she'd still believed in them. It sat mostly unused in the medicine cabinet, reserved for occasions when he needed to project confidence he didn't feel. "Today's pretty important. Are you scared, Daddy?" The question pierced through all his careful defenses. He finished with her hair and met her eyes, seeing his own anxiety reflected in her gaze. Isla possessed an unsettling ability to read his moods, to sense the currents of stress and worry he tried to hide. "A little bit. But mostly I'm excited. I worked really hard on my ideas. Then the Queen Lady will love them." Her certainty made him smile despite everything. If only the world worked the way Isla believed it did, where hard work guaranteed success and important people recognized talent when they saw it. The doorbell rang at 7:20, 10 minutes later than scheduled. Grayson opened it to find Mrs. Donnelly standing in the hallway, slightly out of breath, her gray hair escaping from its usual bun. "I'm so sorry, dear. The bus was running behind. Traffic on 5th Street, some accident." Mrs. Donnelly had lived in the building for 40 years, raised 3 children in the apartment, 2 floors up after her husband died young. She watched Isla 3 mornings a week. When Grayson's schedule required early arrivals at the office, refused to accept more than $15 an hour, no matter how much he protested, and baked cookies that made the whole hallway smell like cinnamon. "It's fine, thank you for coming." She bustled inside, already greeting Isla with the warmth of someone who'd never had granddaughters of her own. Grayson grabbed his presentation materials from the kitchen counter, the leather portfolio worn at the edges but still professional enough. Everything he'd worked on for the past 6 weeks sat inside those folders: research and strategy, and consumer insights distilled into 30 slides and a 15-minute pitch. Isla hugged him at the door, her arms tight around his waist. Make the Queen Lady smile. If only it were that simple. The rain started as he reached the street, a cold drizzle that quickly soaked through his suit jacket. He'd left his umbrella at the office 2 days ago and hadn't remembered to bring it home. Of course. The bus stop sat 3 blocks away, and Grayson ran clutching his portfolio to his chest, trying to protect the presentation materials from the downpour that intensified with each step. The bus arrived late and packed with commuters, bodies pressed together in damp misery. Grayson squeezed into a space near the back, hanging onto an overhead rail as the vehicle lurched through traffic. A woman's wet hair dripped onto his shoulder. Someone's briefcase kept jabbing his knee. The smell of wet wool and stale coffee filled the recycled air. He used the time to run through his presentation one more time, mouthing the words silently while rain streaked down the windows. The Hartwell campaign represented Meridian's biggest potential account in 3 years, a national soap brand looking to rebrand for millennial parents. Grayson had spent weeks analyzing market trends, identifying the emotional core that would make this campaign resonate. Every night after putting Isla to bed, he'd refined the strategy, polished the messaging, anticipated every possible question the executives might ask. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa at reception. "Big day. Break a leg." He typed back a quick thanks, then noticed the time. 8:45. 15 minutes until the presentation. The bus crawled through another intersection, brake lights glowing red in the rain-soaked morning. The Meridian building rose 30 stories above the financial district, all glass and steel reflecting the gray sky. Grayson burst through the revolving doors at 8:58, soaked to the skin, his carefully pressed suit now clinging to him like a second skin that smelled of rain and desperation. Vanessa looked up from her desk, eyes widening. "Oh, honey, you okay?" "Just wet. Conference room ready, all set." But Grayson heads up. "Ashford's already here." His stomach dropped. Victoria Ashford never arrived early, a fact everyone at Meridian knew. She appeared exactly on time for meetings not a minute before or after her schedule managed with military precision by assistants who guarded her calendar like state secrets. Having her already waiting felt like an omen, though whether good or bad remained unclear. The elevator ride to the 14th floor gave him 60 seconds to compose himself. He caught his reflection in the polished door's hair plastered to his forehead, jacket leaving water spots on the floor. Not exactly the image he'd planned to project. The conference room doors loomed ahead, frosted glass revealing shadows of the people already assembled inside. Grayson took a breath that didn't quite fill his lungs, straightened his tie with wet fingers, and pushed through. Silence descended like a curtain. 12 executives sat around the massive table, all eyes turning to him. Grayson registered faces in quick succession. Thomas, the marketing director who'd approved his participation in this pitch. Damian Whitlock, the senior strategist whose 10 years of experience made Grayson's 2 years look like amateur hour. Jennifer from finance. Robert from creative. Others whose names he'd memorized from the company directory, powerful people who controlled budgets and careers with casual decisions. And at the head of the table, Victoria Ashford. She wore a charcoal suit tailored to perfection, dark hair falling past her shoulders in waves that probably required a professional stylist. When she looked up from the document as she'd been reviewing, her green eyes locked with his, and time seemed to stretch, the moment expanding until Grayson felt like he was drowning in it. Mr. Thatcher, her voice cut through the silence, cool and professional, giving nothing away. We're eager to hear your proposal. Something flickered across her face so brief Grayson thought he'd imagined it, recognition, surprise. But it vanished before he could identify it, leaving only the same polished neutrality she showed everyone. He moved toward the front of the room where the presentation screen waited, his shoes squelching slightly on the carpet. The portfolio suddenly felt heavy in his hands, waterlogged and unreliable. He set it down on the presentation table and pulled out his materials, trying to ignore the way his fingers shook. Thank you for this opportunity. The words came out steadier than expected. Grayson began setting up, connecting his laptop to the screen, arranging his notes in the order he'd practiced. Behind him, executives murmured in low voices, probably commenting on his disheveled appearance. His jacket clung to his shoulders like a rebuke. A presentation board slipped from his grasp, clattering to the floor. Grayson bent to retrieve it and found himself face to face with polished black heels, expensive leather that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Victoria Ashford had crossed the room without making a sound. She knelt beside him, helping gather the scattered boards, and for a moment they were at eye level, close enough that Grayson could smell her perfume. Something subtle but distinctive, vanilla and spice, that triggered a memory he couldn't quite place. Their hands touched, reaching for the same board. The contact lasted less than a second, but electricity shot up Grayson's arm, a jolt of recognition that had nothing to do with seeing her in company newsletters. She looked at him, really looked, her green eyes searching his face with an intensity that made his breath catch. Do I know you? The question hung between them, loaded with something Grayson couldn't name. His mind raced through possibilities. Had they met at some company function, passed in the hallway during his 2 years at Meridian? But no, he would have remembered. You didn't forget Victoria Ashford. I don't believe so, Ms. Ashford. I've worked here 2 years, but we've never been formally introduced. She stood and he rose with her, the boards now gathered in his arms. She continued staring at him, head tilted slightly, as if trying to solve a puzzle. You seem familiar. Something about your eyes. Heat crept up Grayson's neck. The entire executive team was watching this exchange, witnessing the CEO's strange fixation on a mid-level employee. I've been told I have a common face. That's not it. She returned to her seat without another word, leaving Grayson standing at the front of the room with his heart hammering against his ribs. He forced himself to focus, to push aside the surreal encounter, and concentrate on the presentation that would determine his future. The Hartwell campaign presents a unique challenge. His voice found its rhythm as he clicked to the first slide. Market research filled the screen, graphs and statistics that painted a picture of changing consumer habits. Grayson walked through the data, his nervousness fading as he entered his element. This was what he was good at, finding patterns in numbers, understanding what made people trust a brand. Traditional soap marketing focuses on cleanliness, germ-free surfaces, antibacterial protection. But our research shows millennial parents care more about ritual than hygiene. He advanced the slides showing survey results, focus group transcripts, Social media sentiment analysis. The executives leaned forward, engaged now. Thomas making notes in the margin of his portfolio. They want products that create moments of connection with their children. Bath time isn't about getting clean. It's about the only 30 minutes all day when screens get turned off and parents are fully present. Victoria remained perfectly still, her gaze never leaving him. It felt unnerving and somehow familiar, like he'd stood under that green-eyed scrutiny before. Grayson continued through the strategy building toward the campaign concept he'd spent weeks perfecting. Every day is special, not because of major milestones, but because of the small moments that define family life. A mother washing her daughter's hair, a father teaching his son to make bubble beards. Ordinary bath times transformed into memories that last forever. The room had gone quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, charged with possibility rather than judgment. Grayson showed mock-ups of ads featuring real families, diverse and imperfect, caught in genuine moments of joy. He presented the social media strategy, the influencer partnerships, the retail placement plan. 15 minutes became 20, then 25. No one interrupted. Thomas nodded at several points. Jennifer scribbled calculations on her notepad. Even Damian Whitlock sat back in his chair with an expression that might have been approval. Only Victoria showed no reaction, her face an unreadable mask. She'd taken no notes during the entire presentation, made no gestures of agreement or disagreement. Just that unwavering stare that made Grayson feel simultaneously seen and transparent. He reached his final slide, a simple image of a parent and child silhouetted against a bathroom window. In conclusion, Hartwell has an opportunity to own the family bath time narrative, not by selling soap, but by selling connection. Silence. Grayson's pulse thundered in his ears as he waited for someone to speak, to offer feedback or ask questions or tell him to sit down so they could move on to Damian's surely superior pitch. Thomas broke first, a smile spreading across his face. Impressive work, Thatcher. Really impressive. Others joined in with questions and comments, the kind of engaged discussion that meant they were taking him seriously. Grayson answered confidently, his research so thorough he could respond to every inquiry without hesitation. The relief washing over him felt almost physical, loosening the tension that had knotted his shoulders since waking up 45 minutes late. Throughout the discussion, Victoria said nothing. She watched the exchange with that same inscrutable expression, giving no indication whether she liked the strategy or hated it. Finally, after 20 minutes of back and forth, she stood. The room fell quiet immediately, everyone's attention snapping to the CEO. "Thank you, Mr. Thatcher. We'll discuss this further and make our decision by end of week." Her tone remained professionally neutral, but something in her eyes suggested layers beneath the surface. The meeting adjourned and executives filed out with murmured congratulations. Grayson gathered his materials, riding the wave of adrenaline and cautious hope that always followed a presentation that hadn't crashed and burned. "Mr. Thatcher," Victoria's voice stopped him halfway to the door. "A word, please?" His heart hammered as the room emptied, leaving them alone. She approached slowly, her perfume growing stronger with proximity. The vanilla and spice scent triggered that same vague memory, dancing just out of reach. "Your presentation was excellent." Relief and surprise warred in his chest. "Thank you, Ms. Ashford. That means a great deal. But I have to ask something." She stood close now, closer than professional distance required. "Have we met before outside of Meridian?" The question landed like a punch. Grayson's mind spun through possibilities, trying to understand why the CEO of a major corporation would care whether she'd encountered one mid-level employee in some previous context. "I don't believe so, Ms. Ashford." She studied him, her head tilted in that same puzzled gesture from earlier. "You seem familiar, something about your eyes, your voice. Perhaps I'm mistaken. I've worked here for 2 years. Maybe we've passed in the hallway." She shook her head slowly. "No, it's something else, something from before." The certainty in her tone unsettled him. Grayson racked his brain for any possible connection. He'd worked for a catering company during graduate school, served at countless events for people he'd never remember. Could she have been at one of those functions? But no, he would have remembered Victoria Ashford. You didn't forget a woman who looked like she did, who carried herself with that kind of presence. Then abruptly she changed the subject. "I understand you are raising a daughter alone." The shift caught him off guard. How did she know that personal details weren't typically shared in employee files beyond emergency contacts? Yes, Isla, she's 6. Something softened in Victoria's expression, a crack in the professional armor. That can't be easy. Grayson felt defensive instincts rising but pushed them down. We manage. It's just the two of us, but we're doing okay. More than okay based on that presentation. Your understanding of family dynamics felt authentic, personal. He couldn't read whether that was compliment or observation. I try to create campaigns that reflect real life, not marketing fantasies. She seemed to be weighing something in her mind, making calculations behind those green eyes. The Hartwell account would mean a promotion for you. It wasn't phrased as a question, but Grayson nodded anyway. It would make a significant difference for us, yes. Stability, security, the ability to afford things that currently lived in the category of impossible dreams. Victoria stepped back, putting professional distance between them again. The executive decision meeting is tomorrow morning. But I'd like to discuss your ideas further before then. Understand your thinking in more depth. Of course, I'm happy to schedule time whenever works best for you. Actually, I was thinking dinner tonight. 7 o'clock. Lucia's on 5th Street. The suggestion stunned him into momentary silence. Dinner with the CEO. That never happened, not in the corporate hierarchy of Meridian Enterprises, where executives inhabited different stratospheres from regular employees. I have my daughter. The words came out before he could think better of them. The automatic response of a single parent whose life revolved around 6-year-old needs and schedules. Bring her. Victoria delivered it simply as if inviting employees and their children to expensive restaurants was standard procedure. I'd like to meet Isla. 7 o'clock. I'll make the reservation. Before Grayson could formulate a response, before he could ask any of the dozen questions crowding his mind, she was walking away. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, each step measured and precise, leaving him standing alone in the conference room with his world tilted sideways. Daddy, is this a date with the Queen? Lady Isla's question made Grayson choke on the water he'd been drinking. They stood in his bedroom 3 hours after the presentation, him attempting to make himself presentable while she sat on the bed watching with the intense focus she applied to everything. No, sweetheart. It's a business dinner. Ms. Ashford wants to discuss my work ideas. Then why are you wearing your special cologne again, kids, and their devastating observations? Because it's a fancy restaurant, and we should look and smell our best. Isla nodded, accepting this logic. Like when I wear my princess dress to birthday parties, exactly like that. Except he felt nothing like a child going to a party. His stomach churned with anxiety and confusion, mind still trying to process Victoria Ashford's strange behavior. The way she'd looked at him during the presentation, her certainty that they'd met before, this dinner invitation that violated every corporate norm. He'd changed into khakis and a button-down shirt, the closest thing he owned to business casual that didn't involve his one suit. Isla wore her favorite purple dress, the one with butterflies embroidered on the hem, her curls tamed into something approaching order. The cab ride to Lucia's cost more than Grayson liked, but taking the bus in their good clothes felt wrong. Isla pressed her nose against the window, watching the city lights blur past as evening settled over the streets. What if she's mean, the Queen lady? What if she's scary in real life? Grayson pulled her close. I don't think she's mean. Powerful people can seem intimidating, but that doesn't make them bad. Do you think she's lonely? The question came out of nowhere, catching him off balance. Why would you think that? Isla shrugged against his side. In my books, queens are always lonely. They live in big castles, but nobody really knows them. The observation struck deeper than expected. Grayson thought about Victoria Ashford sitting at the head of that conference table, surrounded by executives who hung on her every word, yet showed her no real warmth. Respected but isolated by the very power that made her formidable. Maybe she is a little lonely. Then we should be extra nice to her. Lucia's occupied a corner building in the city's upscale dining district, the kind of restaurant Grayson had walked past 100 times without ever considering going inside. White tablecloths gleamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. A doorman in formal attire greeted them as they approached. Reservation for Ashford. The name worked like magic. The host's demeanor shifted from polite to deferential as he led them through the dining room, past tables where well-dressed patrons conducted quiet conversations over wine that probably cost more than Grayson's weekly salary. Victoria was already seated at a corner table, and seeing her outside the office felt surreal. She'd changed from her business suit to a deep blue dress that made her eyes seem even more intense. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, softer than the professional style she'd worn earlier. She stood when she saw them approaching, a gesture that surprised Grayson. Powerful people rarely stood for subordinates. Mr. Thatcher. She greeted him first, then turned her attention to Isla, and something remarkable happened. The Ice Queen of Meridian Enterprises knelt to a 6-year-old's eye level, her entire demeanor transforming. "You must be Isla." "I'm Victoria." Isla's eyes went wide. "You're the Queen, lady." Heat rushed to Grayson's face. "Isla, that's not appropriate." But Victoria laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise her as much as it did them. "Queen lady, I like that much better than CEO." She helped Isla into the booster seat the waiter had provided, chatting easily about favorite colors and books. Grayson watched in amazement as the formidable CEO who'd commanded a boardroom that morning now discussed the merits of different Disney princesses with his daughter. "Purple's an excellent choice." Victoria settled into her own chair, speaking to Isla with the kind of attention adults rarely gave children. "It shows creativity and independence. Queens who wear purple aren't afraid to stand out." The waiter appeared with menus, and Isla became absorbed in the children's selections, complete with crayons for coloring. Victoria's focus shifted to Grayson, and he felt the weight of her attention like a physical thing. "Your daughter is delightful." "Thank you. She's my whole world." Victoria's expression turned thoughtful, something vulnerable flickering beneath the polished surface. "How long have you been raising her alone?" 3 years. Her mother decided parenthood wasn't for her." The words came out more bitter than intended. Grayson rarely discussed Vivian's abandonment with anyone, the wound still raw despite the time that had passed. But Victoria's direct gaze seemed to pull honesty from him, and "She left when Isla was 3. No warning, just a note saying she needed to find herself. Last I heard, she was in California pursuing a music career." Anger flashed in Victoria's eyes, quick and fierce. "That's unforgivable. A child deserves better." Grayson felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the defensive walls he'd built around that particular pain. It was hard, coming home to find her gone, Isla asking when mommy was coming back, trying to explain abandonment to a 3-year-old who didn't understand why her mother stopped loving her. "But we survived. Built something stronger, just the two of us." Victoria glanced at Isla, who was carefully coloring a cartoon mermaid with intense concentration. "She's clearly well-loved and secure. That's a testament to you." The compliment warmed him more than it should have. They ordered food, and the conversation shifted to the presentation, Victoria asking insightful questions that challenged aspects of his strategy in ways that only improved it. Her business mind was remarkable, making connections Grayson had missed, seeing angles he hadn't considered. As they talked, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about the Hartwell campaign. She kept watching him with that searching look, as if trying to place him in some forgotten context. The food arrived, and Isla charmed the waiter by explaining her elaborate color choices for the mermaid. Victoria listened with the same attention she'd given Grayson's presentation, asking questions about Isla's school and friends, what books she liked to read. "Do you speak any other languages?" Isla shook her head, mouthful of pasta. Victoria smiled. "Would you like to learn how to say butterfly in French?" "Yes, papillon." "Can you say that?" Isla repeated it carefully, stumbling over the pronunciation. Victoria corrected her, gently patient, in a way that suggested she had experience with children despite having none of her own. Grayson watched this interaction, feeling something dangerous bloom in his chest. This wasn't the Ice Queen executives whispered about in break rooms. This was someone warm, attentive, almost playful. Someone who made his daughter giggle and treated a single father's concerns with genuine respect. After dinner, when Isla had demolished a bowl of gelato and was growing sleepy, Victoria insisted on having her driver take them home. The objection died on Grayson's lips as he looked outside at the rain that had started again, coming down harder than it had that morning. The black town car waited at the curb, luxury that made Grayson acutely aware of the gulf between his life and Victoria's. Isla bounced excitedly on the leather seats, revived by the prospect of riding in such a fancy vehicle. "Your home address?" The driver's question made Grayson hesitate, embarrassed about his modest apartment building, in a neighborhood that had definitely seen better days. Before he could answer, Victoria spoke. 2347 Westbrook Avenue. Grayson turned to stare at her. "How did you know that?" She caught his surprised look, something almost guilty crossing her face. "It's in your employee file." The explanation didn't quite answer why she would have memorized it, but Grayson let it slide. The car pulled away from the curb, gliding through rain-slicked streets with a smoothness that made his morning bus ride feel like ancient history. Isla fell asleep against his side within minutes, her head heavy on his shoulder. Victoria sat across from them, watching them both with an expression Grayson couldn't read. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward, broken only by rain drumming on the roof and Isla's soft breathing. 2347 Westbrook Avenue turned out to be exactly 15 minutes away. The building looked even more shabby through the car's tinted windows, paint peeling from the facade, one streetlight flickering intermittently. Grayson gathered Isla carefully in his arms, trying not to wake her as he prepared to exit. "Thank you for dinner, and for being so kind to Isla." Victoria stepped out of the car with them, moving to stand close under the shelter of the building's awning. Rain pattered around them, creating a strange sense of intimacy in the narrow space between the car and the entrance. Grayson. She used his first name for the first time, and the sound of it in her voice made his heart stutter. "I need to ask you something, and it might seem strange." His pulse quickened. Okay, 7 years ago, actually 8 years ago, the gallery opening for Thomas Renwick's exhibition. "Were you there?" The question hit him like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. The Renwick exhibition, a night he'd tried to forget for years, filed away in the category of memories too painful to examine. "Yes," he barely whispered it, throat tight. "I was working as a server for the catering company." Victoria's eyes widened, a mix of triumph and something deeper flooding her expression. "I knew it. I never forget a face, especially not yours." The words hung between them, heavy with implications Grayson's exhausted brain couldn't process. Especially not what did that mean? Isla stirred against his shoulder, mumbling something about dolphins in her sleep. The movement broke the spell, reminding them both of where they were, who they were, the impossible distance between CEO and employee. Victoria seemed to catch herself, stepping back slightly. "I should let you get her to bed." "Right, yes." But she didn't move toward the car. Instead, she leaned forward close enough that Grayson caught that vanilla and spice scent again, the one that had been triggering vague memories all day. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I've tried to forget that night, and I failed." Then she was gone, sliding back into the car before Grayson could respond, before he could ask what she meant, or why she remembered, or what any of this was supposed to mean. The town car pulled away, taillights disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness, leaving him standing under the awning with his sleeping daughter and a head full of questions that wouldn't let him rest. Sleep refused to come. Grayson lay in bed staring at the ceiling while rain continued its assault on the windows, each drop echoing Victoria's final words. "I've tried to forget that night and I failed." The phrase circled through his mind like a song stuck on repeat, demanding interpretation he couldn't provide. Beside him on the nightstand, his phone glowed with the time. 2:37 a.m. In 6 hours, he'd need to be functional, presenting himself at the office as if the CEO hadn't just upended everything he thought he understood about his place in the world. The Renwick Gallery. 8 years ago, not 7, like she'd first said. The correction mattered somehow, though Grayson's exhausted brain couldn't grasp why. He closed his eyes and let the memory surface, the one he'd buried under layers of subsequent life choices and deliberate forgetting. 27 years old and drowning in student loan debt, working for elite catering to cover rent while finishing his marketing degree. The Renwick job had paid $200 for 6 hours of standing in uncomfortable shoes, carrying champagne trays through crowds of people who looked through servers like they were furniture. The gallery had been all white walls and track lighting, modern art that Grayson privately thought looked like expensive accidents. Abstract paintings with pretentious titles. Sculptures that defied both gravity and good taste. Rich patrons circulating with wine glasses, speaking in hushed tones about technique and vision, and the emotional resonance of random paint splatters. He'd been refilling champagne flutes near a particularly large canvas when he'd noticed her. Woman in a red dress standing alone by a Rothko painting, something melancholy in her posture, despite the expensive fabric and perfect styling. She'd looked out of place in a way Grayson couldn't articulate, lonely in a room full of people. Their supervisor had been clear about fraternization rules. Speak only when spoken to, never initiate conversation with guests, remain invisible. But something about the woman's isolation had drawn him, made him forget professionalism in favor of human connection. "Do you like it?" She'd turned when he spoke, green eyes finding his with surprise. The painting, he'd clarified, suddenly aware he'd violated every protocol. Do you think it's any good? A smile had ghosted across her lips. What do you think it means? Grayson had looked at the orange and yellow rectangles, really looked searching for something honest to say beyond the gallery's printed description. I think it means the artist had feelings too big for words, so he used color instead. That's better than anything I've heard tonight. They'd talked. Against all sense, Grayson had set down his tray on a nearby bench and talked to this woman whose name he didn't know, about art and purpose and dreams that felt impossible. She'd shared losing someone she loved, building her career to fill the void left behind. He'd confessed his ambitions to create marketing that saw people's humanity instead of reducing them to demographics. The conversation had lasted maybe 30 minutes, though time had felt suspended in that white-walled space. Grayson had forgotten he was working, forgotten the room full of patrons, forgotten everything except the way she listened, like his words mattered. "What's your name?" she'd been asking, when his supervisor appeared face purple with rage. "Thatcher, you're fraternizing with guests. This is unacceptable. You're fired effective immediately." The walk to the exit had felt endless, security escort unnecessary, but provided anyway for maximum humiliation. Grayson had looked back once and seen her standing by the Rothko, watching him go with something like regret in her expression. He'd thought about her often in the weeks that followed, the woman in the red dress who had made him feel seen for half an hour on a Thursday night. But life had moved forward. He'd found another catering job, finished his degree, met Vivian at a coffee shop 3 months later. Vivian, with her quick laugh and easy affection, who'd seemed charmed by his ambitions rather than intimidated. They dated for a year before he proposed, married 6 months after that. Isla had been born 2 years into their marriage, perfect and terrifying and consuming in the way newborns always were. The woman in the red dress had faded to a pleasant memory, filed away with other what-ifs and might-have-beens. Grayson had built a life made choices, invested in a future with someone who'd seemed solid. Then Vivian had left. Came home from work one Tuesday to find her clothes gone and a note on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this anymore. I need to find myself. I'm sorry." No forwarding address, no phone number, just absence where a wife and mother had been. Grayson had spiraled for months trying to hold himself together for Isla, while everything inside felt like it was breaking apart. The divorce had been finalized in absentia, Vivian surrendering all parental rights without contest. Last he'd heard, she was in Los Angeles singing in clubs and living the artist's life she'd apparently been craving all along. Victoria's voice pulled him back to the present. She'd searched for him, hired a private investigator, found him engaged and backed away, then checked on him every year for nearly a decade. The implications made his head spin. No one did that for a stranger they'd talked to for 30 minutes. No one remembered a fired catering server 8 years later, unless that conversation had meant something profound. His phone buzzed on the nightstand screen and illuminating the dark room. Email notification at 2:49 a.m. Grayson reached for it, expecting spam or a work update he could ignore until morning. The sender line made his breath catch. Victoria Ashford, subject tomorrow. The body contained 2 sentences. Daily strategy sessions begin at 9 a.m. in my office. Your input on the Hartwell campaign will be invaluable moving forward. No signature, no pleasantries, pure business. Except it was nearly 3 in the morning, and the CEO of Meridian Enterprises was awake sending emails about meetings that could have been scheduled through normal channels. Grayson stared at the message, reading between the formal lines. She couldn't sleep either. Whatever had passed between them tonight had unsettled her as much as it had him. He typed a response, deleted it, typed another. Finally settled on something professionally neutral that wouldn't reveal the chaos in his chest. "Thank you for the opportunity. I'll be there." Her reply came within seconds, as if she'd been waiting. Good. Nothing else, just that single word. But it felt weighted with all the things neither of them could say through corporate email systems. Grayson set the phone down and closed his eyes, knowing sleep would continue eluding him, but needing to try anyway. Somewhere across the city, Victoria Ashford was probably doing the same, both of them caught in the gravitational pull of a conversation that had started 8 years ago and somehow wasn't finished. Morning arrived gray and unwelcome. Isla bounced into his room at 6:15, apparently the only person in the apartment who'd slept well. She chattered about dolphins and butterflies in the fancy restaurant while Grayson made breakfast on autopilot, his mind already at the office. Mrs. Donnelly arrived promptly at 7:30, took one look at Grayson's face and pressed a thermos of strong coffee into his hands. "You look terrible, dear. Didn't sleep much, big day ahead." Something like that. The Meridian building looked the same as always, glass and steel reflecting morning clouds. But everything felt different as Grayson rode the elevator to the 14th floor. His perception shifted by knowledge he hadn't possessed 24 hours ago. Vanessa glanced up from reception, eyebrows rising. "You're early. Meeting's not until 9. Wanted to prepare." Her expression suggested she didn't quite believe him, but she gestured toward the conference wing anyway. "Ashford's already in her office if you need anything." Of course she was. Grayson wondered if Victoria had slept at all, or if she'd been here since dawn, using work to avoid whatever thoughts had kept her awake. Her office occupied a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The doors stood open and Grayson paused in the threshold, taking in the space that somehow felt both professional and personal. Minimalist furniture, modern art on the walls, a shelf lined with industry awards. Victoria sat at her desk reviewing documents, reading, glasses perched on her nose in a way that made her look more human than the polished CEO from yesterday. She glanced up as he knocked on the doorframe. "Mr. Thatcher, you're punctual." The formality felt deliberate, establishing boundaries after last night's intimacy. Grayson matched her tone. "I respect other people's time." She removed her glasses and gestured to the chair across from her desk. "We have 30 minutes before the others arrive. I wanted to discuss your strategy without interruption." They spent the time dissecting his presentation, Victoria asking questions that pushed his thinking in new directions. Her business acumen was formidable, identifying weaknesses and opportunities with equal precision. But underneath the professional discussion, Grayson felt the current of unspoken things, all the questions neither of them could ask in daylight. At 8:55, other executives began arriving. Thomas with his perpetual coffee cup, Jennifer carrying thick folders of financial projections, Damian Whitlock offering Grayson a nod that might have been respectful. The meeting proceeded with corporate efficiency. Victoria ran through Hartwell timeline expectations, budget parameters, deliverable requirements. Grayson took notes and contributed when appropriate, hyper-aware of her presence at the head of the table. When the meeting concluded, Victoria's voice stopped him at the door. "Same time tomorrow, Mr. Thatcher." It became a pattern. Every morning at 9, gathering in Victoria's office to refine the campaign strategy. The group shrank over the first week as other executives delegated to subordinates until by Friday it was just Grace and Victoria, and occasionally Thomas checking in on progress. The intimacy of those sessions felt dangerous. Victoria challenged every assumption, pushed back on safe choices, demanded excellence that exhausted and energized in equal measure. They argued about consumer psychology and brand positioning, their debates crackling with intellectual chemistry that made Grayson forget she was his boss. Wednesday afternoon, Victoria asked about his background. Not the resume version, but the real story. Grayson found himself describing his childhood in Minneapolis, the scholarship to State University, his mother's pride when he'd graduated, despite working 3 jobs to pay tuition. Thursday, over lunch, she mentioned building Meridian in her bedroom. 10 years ago, the investment firms that had laughed at a 30-year-old woman with no experience. How she'd mortgaged everything to prove them wrong. Friday morning, Isla video called during a coffee break, having forgotten about a school project due that afternoon. Grayson apologized, but Victoria just smiled. "Let me say hello." She talked to his daughter about the project, asked questions about Isla's ideas, taught her a French phrase, papillon. Isla repeated it carefully, delighted by the strange sounds. After the call ended, Victoria looked thoughtful. "She's wonderful. You've done an exceptional job raising her." The compliment settled warm in Grayson's chest. "I try. Some days are harder than others. Single parenthood must be exhausting." He shrugged. "You adjust. Learn to function on less sleep and lower expectations. Accept help when it's offered, even though your pride says to refuse." That afternoon, Isla's school called while Grayson was deep in consumer research. He answered absently, still reading data on his screen. "Mr. Thatcher, this is Amanda from the billing office. We need to discuss the tuition account." His attention sharpened. "Is there a problem?" "Well, not exactly. There was an overpayment. Someone made a substantial anonymous donation covering 3 months. We're trying to return the funds, but we can't identify the donor." Grayson's stomach dropped. "How much? $4,500. It came through a wire transfer last month with just your daughter's name as reference." The office felt too small, suddenly air too thin. He knew exactly who'd made that payment. Only one person had the means and the knowledge and the inexplicable motivation. "Can you hold, please?" He set the phone down carefully, fighting the urge to storm into Victoria's office and demand explanations. Instead, he finished the call with the school asked them to keep the funds in Isla's account and spent the rest of the afternoon constructing rational arguments for a conversation he wasn't sure how to have. Victoria worked late, office lights still blazing at 6:30 when most of the floor had emptied. Grayson knocked on her open door, the words he'd rehearsed evaporating under her surprised look. "Everything all right? Did you pay my daughter's tuition?" Her expression shifted, professional mask slipping enough to reveal guilt underneath. "The company has a scholarship fund for employees facing financial hardship. There is no such fund." I checked the employee handbook. Victoria stood moving to the window with her back to him. "Then I created one. You needed help. I provided it." Anger warred with humiliation in Grayson's chest. "I can't accept charity." She turned to face him, something fierce in her eyes. "It's not charity. It's what companies should do. What I wish someone had done for me when I was struggling to keep my business alive while grieving." The mention of her loss deflated his anger slightly. "I appreciate the thought, but this crosses a line." "What line? The one that says people with power can't help those without it, that we should watch talented people drown rather than throw them a lifeline." "It's not about that." "Then what is it about, Grayson?" His first name and her voice still made his pulse stutter. "It's about maintaining dignity, about earning what I get instead of having it handed to me because the CEO remembers talking to me 8 years ago." Silence fell between them, charged with all the things they weren't saying. Victoria crossed her arms, defensive posture at odds with her earlier confidence. "Fine. I'll have the accounting department reverse the payment." "No," the word came out firmer than intended. Grayson ran a hand through his hair, frustrated by his own contradictions. "Isla needs that money. Her current school is underfunded, and I've been trying to save for the magnet program she deserves. So I'll accept it, but I need to understand why. Why what? Why you care. Why you remember. Why you're doing any of this." Victoria met his gaze directly. Something vulnerable breaking through the corporate armor. "Because 8 years ago, a stranger treated me like a person instead of a title. Because I've spent the better part of a decade wondering what happened to him. Because when he walked into my conference room looking terrified and hopeful, I realized I'd never actually stopped wondering." The confession hung between them, too honest for the office, too raw for colleagues. Grayson felt his careful boundaries crumbling, professional distance impossible in the face of her openness. "I thought about you too. The woman in the red dress who made me feel like my dreams weren't foolish. We barely knew each other. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes 30 minutes can matter more than 30 years." Victoria looked away, blinking rapidly. "I should get back to work." The dismissal felt abrupt, but Grayson accepted it, recognizing when someone needed space to process. He left her standing by the window, silhouetted against the city lights, looking as lonely as she had in that gallery 8 years ago. Week 2 began with careful politeness, both of them maintaining professional distance despite the intimacy of their daily meetings. Monday passed in discussion of focus group results. Tuesday brought revisions to the creative brief. Wednesday involved heated debate about social media strategy that made Grayson forget to be cautious around her. Thursday afternoon, Victoria brought Isla a book, French children's stories with colorful illustrations. She handed it to Grayson casually, as if gifting employees' children was normal. "For Isla, to practice her papillon." He stared at the book, something in his chest going tight. "You didn't have to do this. I know. I wanted to." That evening, Isla insisted on video calling Victoria to say thank you. Grayson tried to discourage it, but his daughter proved more stubborn, and suddenly Victoria's face filled his phone screen, her office replaced by what looked like a home study. "Thank you for the book, Miss Victoria." "You're very welcome, sweetheart. Have you read any stories yet?" They spent 10 minutes discussing the adventures of a brave butterfly, Victoria's face softening in ways Grayson had never seen at the office. When Isla finally said goodnight, Victoria's attention shifted to him. "She's lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one." Victoria smiled, something sad in the expression. "Good night, Grayson." The screen went dark, leaving him staring at his own reflection and wondering how this had become his life. Friday brought severe weather, thunderstorms rolling in from the west with meteorological fury. By 5 o'clock, most of the office had evacuated ahead of the storm warnings. Grayson stayed late working on consumer personas, too absorbed to notice the emptying building. The lights died at 6:47, plunging the floor into darkness, broken only by emergency exit signs. Grayson looked up from his laptop battery power, keeping his screen illuminated, to find the entire office grid down. A door opened down the hall. Footsteps approached and Victoria appeared in his doorway, phone flashlight in hand. "You're still here." Lost track of time. "Is the power out everywhere? Whole building. Transformer blue. They're saying 2 hours minimum for repairs." She looked different in the harsh phone light, shadows emphasizing the exhaustion he'd learned to recognize. How many nights had she stayed late, working alone in this building? "I should head home before the storm gets worse." Victoria glanced toward the windows where rain was already starting to streak the glass. "It's not safe to travel yet." The alert said hail and possible tornadoes. Thunder cracked overhead, punctuating her point. Grayson saved his work and closed the laptop. "I'll wait it out then. Come to my office. I have candles." The suggestion felt dangerous for reasons having nothing to do with weather. But staying alone in his dark cubicle seemed worse. So Grayson followed her down the hallway to the corner suite, where her windows revealed the storm in full glory. Victoria had indeed prepared lighting emergency candles that cast warm, flickering light across the office. She gestured to the chairs by her window, and they sat watching lightning fork across dark clouds. "Does this happen often?" "A few times a year. I keep supplies for emergencies." Of course she did. Victoria Ashford prepared for everything, controlled every variable, maintained order in a chaotic world. Except she couldn't control whatever this was between them, the pull that had started 8 years ago and refused to weaken. Rain intensified, hammering against the windows. Thunder rolled closer. In the candlelight, Victoria's face looked younger, vulnerable in ways the fluorescent office lights never allowed. "Can I ask you something?" She turned from the storm to meet his eyes. "Always. Why did you search for me really beyond guilt about getting me fired?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment, candlelight playing across her features. "After my daughter died, I shut down. Built walls so high nothing could hurt me again. I dated people who were safe, predictable, who wouldn't make me feel anything too deeply." Her voice was barely audible over the rain. "Then I met you. A stranger who talked about art and dreams with such passion it broke through all my careful defenses. You made me feel alive again just for 30 minutes. And when they escorted you out, I realized I didn't even know your name." Grayson's throat tightened. "I never knew yours either until I started working here. I looked for you everywhere. Social media, professional networks, old catering company, employee lists. I hired an investigator after 3 months because I couldn't stop thinking about you. What did you think would happen if you found me?" Victoria's laugh held no humor. "I don't know. I hadn't planned beyond just knowing you were okay. Then the investigator sent photos of you with Vivian looking happy. I realized I had no right to disrupt your life. So you stopped searching." "No, I asked him to check on you annually, just to know you were safe." "That sounds obsessive, doesn't it? It sounds lonely." She looked at him sharply, something raw in her expression. "It was lonely. Building an empire while watching you build a family from the outside. Seeing you get married, have a child, then watching your marriage fall apart and not being able to help. When I joined Meridian, did you know I approved your hiring personally, saw your application, and recognized the name immediately? I told myself I'd stay away, maintain professional distance. But then you walked into that presentation looking exactly like you did 8 years ago, and I couldn't pretend anymore. Pretend what? That I'd moved on, that you were just a pleasant memory, that I hadn't been waiting for you to walk back into my life." Thunder crashed so close the building shook. The candles flickered but held steady. Grayson stood crossing to where Victoria sat, his heartbeat loud in his ears. "I tried to forget that conversation too. Told myself it didn't mean anything, that we were just two people who had a nice talk. I married Vivian trying to prove it. Did it work? No. Because every time we talked about the future, I'd think about the woman who understood my dreams without needing explanations. Every time Vivian complained I was too passionate about work, I'd remember someone who thought passion was worth having." Victoria stood as well, so close now he could see the candlelight reflected in her eyes. "I've been in love with the idea of you for 8 years. Now that you're here, I'm terrified because it's not an idea anymore." Lightning illuminated the office in stark white light. Thunder followed immediately, the storm directly overhead now. Grayson reached up his hand, trembling slightly as it cupped her cheek. I think I've been waiting 8 years too. She closed the distance between them, or maybe he did, the candles casting their shadows against the wall as they finally gave in to the gravity that had been pulling them together since the moment their hands touched, picking up scattered presentation boards. Her lips were soft against his, tentative at first, then deepening as 8 years of wondering and wanting compressed into a single moment. Grayson's other hand found her waist, pulling her closer while her fingers tangled in his hair. The storm raged outside, but the office felt like the stillest place in the world. The power surged back on with mechanical violence, fluorescent lights blazing after the gentle candlelight. They broke apart, blinking in the sudden brightness, the spell shattered by mundane reality. Victoria stepped back, smoothing her hair with shaking hands. I should blow out these candles before they trigger the smoke detectors, right? Yes. The moment felt broken, impossible to recapture under harsh office lighting, with the building's HVAC system humming back to life around them. Grayson gathered his things while Victoria restored order to her office, both of them avoiding eye contact. At the elevator, she finally looked at him. Grayson, I know. It can't happen again. Not here. Not while you report to me. I understand. The elevator arrived and he stepped inside, watching her face until the doors closed between them. His phone buzzed in his pocket during the descent, a text from Victoria. I don't regret it. He stared at the message, thumb hovering over the reply field. The elevator reached the ground floor before he'd formulated words adequate to the complexity in his chest. Neither do I. The storm had passed, leaving the streets washed clean and smelling of ozone. Grayson walked to the bus stop in a daze, replaying the kiss, Victoria's confession, the feeling of her in his arms. Everything felt both more complicated and simpler than it had been that morning. His phone rang at 6:15 the next morning, Donnelly's number flashing on the screen. Grayson answered with his eyes still closed, brain fuzzy from another night of inadequate sleep. Mr. Thatcher, I'm so sorry to bother you this early, but Isla's been calling for you. She's burning up, and I don't know what to do. He was out of bed before she finished speaking, pulling on clothes as he kept the phone pressed to his ear. How high is her fever? 102.5. She's been sick to her stomach, too. I gave her children's medicine, but she can't keep anything down. I'm coming now. The cab ride cost $40, but Grayson didn't care, watching the meter tick upward while his mind calculated scenarios. Just a virus. Kids got fevers all the time. She'd be fine. Mrs. Donnelly met him at the door, looking genuinely worried. Isla lay on the couch wrapped in blankets, despite the fever, her face flushed and hair damp with sweat. Daddy? Her voice was small and scared. Grayson gathered her against his chest, feeling the heat radiating through the blankets. I'm here, sweetheart. I've got you. She whimpered against his shoulder. Everything hurts. The weekend passed in a fever-hazed blur. Isla's temperature spiked to 103.8 Saturday night. The on-call pediatrician, advised watching for signs of appendicitis, told Grayson when to head for the emergency room versus riding it out at home. Sunday brought marginal improvement. The fever dropped to 101, but Isla couldn't keep food down. She slept fitfully, waking every few hours, crying about pain in her stomach. Grayson sat beside her bed, cool washcloth in hand, checking his phone compulsively for the email that would probably arrive Monday morning. The executive decision meeting. The meeting where they'd choose between his strategy and Damien's, deciding the trajectory of his career. Is the Queen Lady going to be mad? You're not at work? Isla's question made his heart clench. Even sick, she worried about him. No, sweetheart. She'll understand. Are you sure it sounded really important? You're more important than any job. The words felt true speaking them, but Grayson couldn't suppress the anxiety gnawing his stomach. This was his shot. The opportunity that came once in a career if you were lucky, and he'd miss it because his daughter needed him. But that was parenthood. Choosing your child over ambition every single time, even when it cost everything. Monday morning arrived with Isla's fever still hovering around 101. Mrs. Donnelly had left town Friday to visit her daughter in Pittsburgh, wouldn't return until Wednesday. Grayson had no backup childcare, no family within 1,000 miles, no options except staying home. He called the office at 6:30, got Vanessa's voicemail. This is Grayson Thatcher. My daughter is ill. I won't be able to attend the executive meeting this morning. Please inform Ms. Ashford and apologize on my behalf. The call felt inadequate career suicide compressed into 30 seconds of recorded message. Grayson hung up and returned to Isla's bedside, feeling his future slip away while he sat helpless to stop it. His phone buzzed at 7:15 with a text from Victoria. Stay with Isla. Meeting will proceed. Don't worry about the presentation. The message should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like confirmation that without him there to defend his work, Damien's experience would win out. Grayson typed a response asking if he could join remotely, but the building's Wi-Fi had died during Saturday's storm service, still spotty. 9 o'clock arrived. Grayson tried connecting to a video call on his laptop, but the signal kept dropping, pixelated faces freezing mid-sentence before the screen went black. He gave up after the third attempt, sitting with Isla, while the meeting that would decide everything happened without him. She slept through the morning fever, finally breaking around 11. Grayson dozed in the chair beside her bed, exhausted from 2 nights of interrupted sleep, too anxious to rest properly. The doorbell rang at 1:30. He woke disoriented, checking that Isla still slept peacefully before heading to answer. Probably a delivery, something he had ordered and forgotten about. Victoria Ashford stood in the hallway holding a leather portfolio and a stuffed dolphin. Grayson stared, brains struggling to reconcile the CEO of Meridian Enterprises standing outside his modest apartment in the middle of a Monday afternoon. Ms. Ashford, how did you, may I come in? He stepped aside automatically, suddenly aware of his rumpled t-shirt and 2-day stubble, the apartment's mismatched furniture and worn carpet. Victoria entered as if visiting employee apartments was standard practice, setting the portfolio on his coffee table before turning to him. How is Isla? Her fever broke this morning. She's sleeping. Good. That's good. Victoria held out the stuffed dolphin, the gesture somehow more intimate than their kiss had been. This is for her, when she's feeling better. I remember you mentioned dolphins are her favorite. Grayson took the toy throat tight. Thank you. That's very kind. I came to deliver news that couldn't wait. His stomach dropped. Here it came. The gentle letdown, the explanation of why Damien's proposal better fit the client's needs, the offer of some consolation prize position. I understand these things happen. Family comes first. Victoria's expression shifted, something almost amused breaking through. Grayson, she interrupted before he could continue the self-deprecating speech. Your proposal was selected. Unanimously. The words didn't compute at first. He stared at her, waiting for the punchline. But I wasn't there to present it. I presented it for you. Victoria moved to sit on his couch, gesturing for him to join her. After our working sessions, I understood your strategy completely. I walked the board through the research, explained the creative concept, answered all their questions. But they were impressed, both with the work itself and with your dedication to your daughter. Thomas made a comment about hiring people who understand priorities. The vote was 11-1. Who dissented? Damien. But even he admitted your approach was stronger. He just voted for himself out of principle. Grayson sank onto the couch beside her, overwhelmed. You presented my work. You risked your objectivity for me. I presented excellent work that deserved consideration regardless of who created it. The board made their decision based on merit. Still, you could have postponed the meeting. Let me present when Isla recovered. Victoria met his eyes directly. I spent 8 years watching you from a distance. I wasn't going to let you lose this opportunity because of circumstances beyond your control. The truth of what she'd done settled over him. She'd put her reputation, her professional credibility, her carefully maintained boundaries on the line. For him, I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept the position of creative director for the Hartwell account. Her smile was small but genuine. It comes with a substantial raise and more flexible hours for family emergencies. You'll report to James, not me, to maintain appropriate oversight. You thought of everything. I usually do. They sat in silence for a moment, the enormity of the shift in his life sinking in. Creative director, the title he had been reaching for since joining Meridian, suddenly within grasp. Why would you do this for me? Victoria's professional mask slipped, completely revealing the vulnerability underneath. Because 8 years ago you were fired for talking to me. I won't let that happen again in any form. And because I love you, Grayson. I have for 8 years. I just didn't let myself believe I could have this. Have what? She looked around the small apartment at the photos of Isla on the walls, the well-worn furniture that spoke of careful budgeting. A family, a home, someone who sees me for who I am instead of what I've built. I see you, I know. That's what terrifies me. Isla's voice called from the bedroom, small and sleepy. Daddy Grayson stood reluctantly, the moment suspended between them. I should check on her. Of course, he went to Isla's room, found her sitting up in bed, looking fragile but alert. The worst of the fever had passed, leaving her pale but coherent. How do you feel, sweetheart? Better? Is someone here? The honesty seemed important. Yes. Victoria came to bring you a present. Isla's eyes widened. The Queen Lady is here. Can I see her? You should rest a bit longer. But a few minutes later, he relented, helping Isla to the living room where Victoria waited with the dolphin. His daughter's face lit up, seeing the toy, all earlier sickness, forgotten in the joy of an unexpected gift. Thank you, Miss Victoria. He's perfect. You're welcome, sweetheart. I'm glad you're feeling better. Isla climbed onto the couch beside Victoria, chattering about the dolphin's name and personality, with the kind of instant attachment children formed with special toys. Grayson watched them together, something in his chest expanding painfully. Victoria met his eyes over Isla's head, her expression saying what words couldn't in front of his daughter. This was what she wanted, what she'd been missing. A family that was more than just professional success in empty houses. After 30 minutes, Isla's energy flagged and Grayson carried her back to bed. When he returned to the living room, Victoria was standing by the window looking out at the neighborhood. I should go. Let you both rest. Victoria, she turned something fragile in her eyes. What happens now? He crossed to her, taking her hands. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Your career will be fine. You made sure of that. But us, we need to be careful, I know. But I don't want to be careful forever, neither do I. They stood close enough that Grayson could count her individual eyelashes, see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. The kiss felt inevitable, softer than the one in her office, weighted with promises instead of surprise. When they finally separated, Victoria rested her forehead against his. Thank you, for what? For being worth waiting for. 2 weeks crawled by in a blur of paperwork and orientation sessions. The corner office on the 14th floor felt surreal every morning when Grayson unlocked the door, his nameplate gleaming beside it. Creative director. The words still didn't feel entirely real, as if the universe might realize its mistake and revoke everything. His first day began at 7:30, an hour before the official start time. Isla had insisted on visiting before school, her small hand gripping his as they rode the elevator up together. The office smelled of new carpet and furniture polish, windows, offering a view of the city he'd only glimpsed from conference rooms. You have a big desk, Daddy. She ran her fingers along the mahogany surface, eyes wide. Are you the king now? Just a director, sweetheart. There are people much more important than me. But you have a window and your own door. Mrs. Donnelly arrived to collect Isla at 8:15, giving Grayson an approving nod. You've earned this, dear. Don't let anyone tell you different. The office gradually filled with colleagues stopping by to offer congratulations. Thomas brought coffee and stayed 20 minutes discussing timeline expectations. Jennifer from finance dropped off budget projections with a warm smile. Even Damian Whitlock appeared in the doorway, expression difficult to read. Your pitch was stronger than mine. I told the board that even though I voted for myself, the admission couldn't have been easy. Grayson gestured to the chairs. No hard feelings. Damian settled into a seat, some tension leaving his shoulders. None. Competition makes us better. And honestly, watching you work these past weeks, you've got instincts I had to learn through trial and error. They spent an hour trading war stories about campaigns that had crashed spectacularly, finding common ground and shared professional trauma. By the time Damian left, something resembling friendship had taken tentative root. Victoria's email arrived at 10:30. Subject: reporting structure. The body was professionally terse. You report to James Henderson, CMO, effective immediately. All Hartwell decisions flow through his approval. I've copied him on this message to establish clear chain of command. Translation: we maintain distance. No appearance of impropriety. Boundaries firmly in place. Grayson replied with equal formality, thanking her for the clarification. His cursor hovered over the send button before he added a final line. Coffee sometime as colleagues. Her response came within minutes. I'd like that. The week unfolded in meetings and strategy sessions, building his team for the Hartwell launch. Grayson hired two junior creatives from the applicant pool, both hungry and talented, in ways that reminded him of himself 3 years ago. He set up workflows and approval processes, learning to delegate instead of trying to control every detail. Friday afternoon, Victoria appeared in his doorway. The surprise of seeing her outside scheduled meetings made his pulse jump. "Walk with me." They rode the elevator down in silence, the air between them charged with everything unsaid. Outside, the financial district buzzed with end-of-week energy people, eager to escape offices for weekend freedom. "How's the transition going?" Victoria's question sounded casual, but her eyes searched his face for truth. Grayson considered lying, maintaining the professional veneer. Instead, he offered honesty. "Terrifying. Exhilarating. I keep waiting to wake up and find this was all a dream." "It's not a dream. You earned this position." They walked without destination, finding themselves in a small park 3 blocks from the office. Victoria sat on a bench and Grayson joined her, careful to maintain space between them, despite the urge to close the distance. "Isla asks about you every night. When is Miss Victoria visiting again?" Something vulnerable crossed her face. "I'd like to visit, but we need to be careful about appearances." "I know. The office gossip mill already churns overtime about my promotion." "Let them gossip. Your work speaks for itself." A young mother pushed a stroller past them toddler, chattering about ducks in the pond. Victoria watched them with an expression Grayson had learned to recognize, longing mixed with old grief. "Tell me about Elena." The request surprised them both. Victoria's hands twisted in her lap, a rare display of nervousness. She was born at 38 weeks. Perfectly formed, perfectly still. The doctor said sometimes these things happen with no warning, no reason, no one to blame. How long ago? 13 years. I was 25, married to a man who blamed me even though logic said otherwise. The marriage lasted 6 months after. I threw myself into building the company, using work to avoid feeling anything. And you've been alone since then. Victoria's laugh held no humor. I've dated safe relationships with appropriate men who never made me feel too much. Then I met you and all that careful control meant nothing. Grayson risked reaching for her hand, their fingers tangling together on the bench between them. "We'll figure this out, promise." The vulnerability in her voice made his chest ache. "I promise, but we need time to let things settle. Let my promotion become old news before we give them something else to talk about." "How much time?" "A few weeks. Maybe a month. Just enough that no one can claim favoritism." She squeezed his hand once before releasing it, professional mask sliding back into place. "Dinner next Friday. You and Isla. My place this time." The invitation felt significant, letting them into her private space instead of neutral restaurants. Grayson nodded. She'd like that. So would I. They walked back to the office, separately maintaining appearances. But something had shifted between them, moving from possibility toward reality. Week 3 brought the first official date, Victoria arriving at a coffee shop 3 neighborhoods away from both their homes and the office. Neutral territory where coworkers were unlikely to appear. She wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail that made her look younger. Is this weird meeting in secret like teenagers? Grayson slid her coffee across the small table. Little bit, but also kind of nice. No one watching, no expectations. They talked for 2 hours about everything except work. Her childhood in Connecticut, daughter of parents who'd expected her to marry appropriately instead of starting a company. His Minneapolis upbringing, scholarship kid, who'd never quite fit in with either the rich students or the ones from his own neighborhood. The conversation flowed easily, picking up threads from 8 years ago, as if no time had passed. When they finally left, Victoria walked him to his bus stop despite the light rain beginning to fall. Thank you for giving me a chance at this. Grayson brushed wet hair from her face, the gesture intimate despite the public setting. You gave me a career. Least I can do is give you a second date. So there will be a second date, many of them if you'll have me. Her smile transformed her face, making her look almost carefree. I'll have you for as long as you'll stay. Week 5 arrived with a school notice about Isla's class play. The children would perform their interpretation of seasons, each student assigned a specific role. Isla came home bouncing with excitement, waving her permission slip. I'm a butterfly, Daddy, a spring butterfly, and I get to say papillon because Miss Victoria taught me. The play was scheduled for Thursday evening. Grayson took the afternoon off, sitting in the school gymnasium among other parents on folding chairs that squeaked with every movement. The stage was decorated with construction paper flowers and hand-painted trees, childish art that somehow captured genuine beauty. Victoria appeared 10 minutes before curtains, slipping into the seat beside him with whispered apology. Traffic on the interstate was terrible. You came. Of course I came. Isla sent me a formal invitation with glitter. She showed him the card, purple construction paper covered in Isla's careful handwriting and far too much sparkle. Grayson's throat tightened, seeing Victoria had saved it, brought it with her like a precious artifact. The lights dimmed and children filed onto stage in homemade costumes. Isla wore wings constructed from wire hangers and tissue paper antennae bobbing on her head as she took her position. When her moment arrived, she stepped forward and announced, clearly, "I am a papillon." Several parents laughed at the French word in her American accent, but Victoria's hand found Grayson's in the darkness, squeezing tight as Isla delivered her lines about spring, bringing new life and beautiful changes. After the play, parents gathered outside the gymnasium for juice and cookies. Isla spotted Victoria immediately launching herself into a hug that nearly knocked them both over. "Did you see me? Did you hear my French? You were magnificent, a perfect papillon." Other parents noticed the interaction, whispers spreading through the crowd. Grayson caught fragments of conversation. "That's Victoria Ashford. What's she doing here? Is she dating someone with a kid? Let them wonder. Let them talk." Victoria knelt beside Isla, discussing the finer points of Butterfly performance, completely absorbed in his daughter's breathless recap. This was worth any amount of gossip. Mrs. Donnelly appeared with a knowing smile. "Well now, the Queen Lady came after all." Victoria stood, offering her hand. "You must be Mrs. Donnelly. I've heard wonderful things." The older woman shook hands firmly. "And I've heard interesting things about you, Miss Ashford. That man there needs someone who sees past his stubborn pride. I'm working on it." Week 8 brought launch day for the Hartwell campaign. Grayson had been functioning on caffeine and anxiety for 72 hours, overseeing final production tweaks and coordinating with media buyers. The ads would run nationally starting midnight, a coordinated push across television, social media, and print. His team gathered in the conference room at 11:45, watching the clock tick toward launch. Someone had brought champagne despite the late hour. Damien appeared with congratulations, and James Henderson gave a brief speech about excellence and innovation. At midnight, the first commercial aired during a late-night show. Grayson watched it on the conference room screen, seeing his vision translated into reality. A mother washing her daughter's hair, both laughing about soap bubbles. The tagline, "Every day is special." Applause erupted in the room. Phones buzzed with social media notifications as early responses started flooding in. The initial reactions seemed positive, but real success wouldn't be measurable for weeks. Grayson's phone rang at 12:30. Victoria's name on the screen. He stepped into the hallway to answer. "Congratulations. It's beautiful work. Too early to tell if it'll be successful." "It will be. Trust me, I've been doing this long enough to recognize a winning campaign." Her confidence steadied something anxious in his chest. "Thank you. For everything. For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You did the work, Grayson. I just made sure people noticed." He wanted to say more, but colleagues were spilling into the hallway, celebrating with the kind of enthusiasm that only came from surviving a major launch. Victoria seemed to understand. "Go celebrate with your team. But Grayson, I'm proud of you." The call ended before he could respond, leaving him standing in the hallway with warmth spreading through his chest despite the exhaustion dragging at his bones. Within 2 weeks, the numbers told the story. Market share increased 23%. Social media engagement exploded with parents sharing their own bath time moments using the campaign hashtag. Trade publications featured Grayson's strategy, calling him a rising star in family marketing. His calendar filled with interview requests and speaking invitations. The publicity department wanted him for a feature in Advertising Monthly. A competitor tried to recruit him with salary offers that made his eyes water. Victoria sent flowers to his office with a card that read simply, "Told you so." Week 12 arrived with Isla's 7th birthday, a milestone that felt momentous after the chaos of the past months. Grayson had moved them to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood using his salary increase to finally afford the space Isla deserved. She now had her own bedroom painted purple at her insistence, with new furniture that wasn't salvaged from yard sales. The birthday party happened in their modest building's courtyard, modest decorations, and a homemade cake because some traditions deserve preserving. Mrs. Donnelly came with her daughter visiting from Pittsburgh. A few of Isla's school friends ran around playing tag. Thomas appeared with his wife and twin boys. Victoria arrived fashionably late, carrying a box so large it required both arms. Isla shrieked with delight when unwrapped, revealing an elaborate dollhouse with working lights and furniture in every room. "It's too much," Grayson spoke quietly, but Victoria just smiled. "It's exactly right. Every girl deserves a house where she can make her dreams come true." The other parents noticed Victoria's presence, whispers circulating about the CEO attending an employee's child's party. Grayson watched her settle into a lawn chair, accepting lemonade from Mrs. Donnelly and chatting easily with Thomas's wife about the challenges of raising children in the city. She fit. That was the remarkable thing. Despite her wealth and status and the empire she commanded, Victoria sat in his modest courtyard playing party games with 7-year-olds like it was the most natural thing in the world. As sunset painted the sky orange and pink, Isla brought Victoria a piece of cake. "Thank you for coming to my party. You're my favorite person besides Daddy." Victoria's eyes glistened. "You're my favorite person too, sweetheart." After the guests left and Isla went to bed exhausted from excitement, Victoria helped clean up despite Grayson's protests. They worked in comfortable silence, disposing of paper plates and folding chairs. She had a good day. The best. "Thank you for the dollhouse and for being here." Victoria set down the trash bag, turning to face him. "I wouldn't have missed it. Watching her blow out those candles, seeing how loved she is, it reminded me of everything I'd given up hoping for." "You don't have to give it up. We're here, we're real." I'm starting to believe that. 6 months after his promotion, Victoria sent an email with just a subject line: "Renwick Gallery reopening. Friday night. Would you and Isla join me?" The invitation felt weighted with significance. Grayson understood immediately what she was offering, a chance to close the circle that had begun 8 years ago in that same space. Friday evening arrived cool and clear, autumn settling over the city with gentle insistence. Grayson dressed carefully in his new suit, the one he'd bought after receiving his first substantial paycheck. Isla wore her favorite purple dress, now getting tight in the shoulders because she'd grown 2 inches since spring. Victoria picked them up in her car, something sleek and expensive that made Isla gasp with delight. The gallery looked exactly as Grayson remembered: white walls and track lighting, though the art had changed with the years. They walked through the exhibits, slowly Victoria explaining pieces to Isla, with the same patience she'd shown teaching French words. His daughter asked questions about color and meaning, absorbing information with the intensity she brought to everything. The Rothko painting hung in its original location, orange and yellow rectangles, that had witnessed the beginning of something neither Grayson nor Victoria had understood at the time. They stood before it, Isla between them on all three, studying the abstract forms. "What does it mean?" Isla's question hung in the air, echoing the same inquiry Victoria had asked 8 years ago. Grayson and Victoria exchanged glances over her head, something passing between them that needed no words. "It means sometimes the most important things can't be explained with language." Victoria's voice was soft, thoughtful. "It means when you find something beautiful, you hold on to it, even when it seems impossible." Grayson added his interpretation, completing her thought. "It means some connections are meant to last. They just need time to develop." Isla looked between them, wisdom beyond her years in her eyes. "Like you two." The observation landed with gentle accuracy. Yes, exactly like them. They moved to the gallery's balcony, ostensibly to admire the city view, as sunset painted the sky in shades that echoed the Rothko canvas. Other patrons circulated inside champagne glasses, catching light, but the balcony offered relative privacy. Mrs. Donnelly had agreed to collect Isla after dinner, giving them an hour alone. His daughter was inside now, charming the gallery curator with questions about paintbrush techniques. 8 years ago, I stood by that painting, feeling empty. Victoria leaned against the railing, sunset illuminating her profile. I'd lost my daughter, my marriage had fallen apart, and I'd thrown myself into building a company because work was easier than feeling. Then a stranger talked to me about art and dreams with such genuine passion, it cracked something open inside me. I thought that night was an ending. Getting fired, losing you before I even knew your name. Grayson moved to stand beside her, their shoulders nearly touching. I tried to forget you. Married Vivian, had Isla built a life. But you were always there, this what if I couldn't quite release. I never stopped looking for you, even when I thought I should, even when it seemed obsessive. I needed to know you were okay. The sun dropped lower, painting them both in golden light. Victoria turned to face him fully, her expression open in ways it had taken months to achieve. Do you know what I've learned these past months? That waiting for something doesn't diminish its value. Sometimes the wait makes you appreciate it more when it finally arrives. Grayson cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. Victoria Ashford, 8 years ago, you asked what I was searching for in that painting. I didn't know then, but I know now. It was you. It was always you. And I was searching for someone who saw me. Not the CEO, not the success story, not the empire. Just me. The woman who lost a daughter and didn't know how to grieve. Who built walls so high she forgot how to let anyone inside. I see you. I've always seen you, I know. That's what made it impossible to forget. The kiss happened, naturally inevitable as gravity. Sunset painted them in amber light, while inside the gallery, patrons sipped champagne, oblivious to the moment unfolding on the balcony. 8 years of waiting and wondering compressed into a single point of contact lips meeting with the kind of certainty that only came from patience rewarded. When they finally separated, Victoria rested her forehead against his. This is real now, not a fantasy or a what if. This is our life. It is. And I want every day of it, even the hard days, when work is terrible and Isla's sick and nothing goes according to plan, especially those days, because we'll face them together. Inside, Yella had found Mrs. Donnelly and was showing her the gallery's sculpture garden through the windows. The older woman caught Grayson's eye and gave a knowing nod, as if she'd orchestrated this entire evening instead of simply agreeing to provide childcare. They collected Isla and drove to dinner at a small Italian restaurant Victoria had discovered years ago. The owner greeted her by name, leading them to a quiet corner table. Over pasta and stories about Isla's latest school adventures, something settled into place. The pieces that had been scattered 8 years ago finally arranging themselves into a picture that made sense. After dinner, they returned to Grayson's apartment. The building was nicer than his previous place, but still modest by Victoria's standards. She'd never commented on the difference in their lifestyles, never made him feel less than for what he could afford. Isla lasted 30 minutes before exhaustion claimed her. Grayson carried her to bed, tucking the blankets around her small form. She mumbled something about perfect days and princess ladies before sleep pulled her under completely. Victoria waited in the living room, studying the photos covering one wall. Grayson and Isla at various ages charting their journey as a family of two. She touched the frame of one picture, Isla as a toddler covered in birthday cake. You've given her a beautiful life. We've survived. That's about all I can claim. You've done more than survive. You've loved her so completely, she's never doubted her worth for a single moment. That's extraordinary. Grayson settled onto the couch and Victoria joined him, her body fitting against his side like she'd always belonged there. They sat in comfortable silence, the day's events settling around them. I never thought I'd have this again. Victoria's voice was quiet, reflective. After Elena died, I convinced myself family wasn't meant for me, that I'd used up my chance and needed to accept a life defined by professional success instead of personal connection. And now I'm terrified because I want this so much it hurts. I want movie nights and school plays and birthday parties and courtyard. I want to teach Isla more French words and help with homework and be part of the ordinary magic you've built. You already are part of it. You have been since you showed up at my door with a stuffed dolphin. She turned to look at him directly, something vulnerable in her gaze. I love you, Grayson. Not the idea of you, not the memory from 8 years ago. I love who you are right now in this moment with all your complexities and contradictions. I love you too. I think I have since that night at the gallery. I just didn't have the language for it yet. They kissed again, softer than before, weighted with promise instead of urgency. The apartment felt like the center of the universe in that moment, everything else fading to background noise. Eventually, Victoria stood reluctantly, checking the time on her phone. I should go. Early meeting tomorrow with investors. Stay. The invitation surprised them both. Grayson hadn't planned to say it, but now that the words hung between them, he didn't want to take them back. Just to sleep. I'm not ready for you to leave yet. Victoria considered, weighing propriety against desire. Then she smiled. Neither am I. They settled into Grayson's bed, fully clothed, fitting together like puzzle pieces, finally finding their proper arrangement. Victoria's head rested on his chest, his arm around her shoulders, both of them listening to each other breathe. Thank you for not giving up on finding me. Thank you for being worth the search. Sleep came easily for the first time in weeks, both of them finally at rest. Morning arrived with Isla's voice calling from her bedroom. Daddy, can I have pancakes? Grayson woke to find Victoria still beside him, hair mussed and eyes soft with sleep. She looked younger like this, vulnerable in ways her professional armor never allowed. Does she know I'm here? About to find out. Isla appeared in the doorway, stopping short when she saw them. Her eyes went wide, processing the scene. Then a smile spread across her face. Did Miss Victoria have a sleepover? Something like that. Is that okay with you? Isla climbed onto the bed between them, settling like this arrangement was the most natural thing in the world. Can she stay for pancakes? I'd love to stay for pancakes. Victoria's easy acceptance made something in Grayson's chest expand. This was his life now. Sunday morning with his daughter and the woman he loved making breakfast in their modest kitchen, while sunlight streamed through windows. Over pancakes, Isla chattered about the gallery and the paintings and whether they could go back sometime. Victoria listened with complete attention, asking questions and making suggestions. Mrs. Donnelly arrived to collect Isla for their standing Sunday afternoon movie tradition, giving Grayson and Victoria a meaningful look before departing. Alone in the apartment, they settled on the couch with coffee. Victoria traced patterns on his arm, her touch light and absent. What happens now? Grayson pulled her closer. We keep doing this. Building something real one day at a time. People will talk. At the office, in the industry. Let them. I'm not hiding you. Not hiding us. Your career is secure. The Hartwell campaign's success speaks for itself. And if anyone has problems, they can take it up with me directly. Victoria's smile held relief in something deeper. You've changed, you know. Since that first presentation, you're more confident, more willing to claim what you've earned. I had good motivation. Watching you command boardrooms and build empires showed me what's possible when you stop apologizing for wanting success. They sat in comfortable silence, the morning stretching ahead with no demands or schedules. Eventually, Victoria's phone buzzed with the first of many messages pulling them back toward the obligations of their lives. I really do have that investor meeting. Jericho, conquer the financial world. Long. But come back tonight for dinner with Isla, for whatever time you want to spend here. This is your home too now if you want it to be. The invitation was premature by conventional relationship standards, but nothing about them had ever been conventional. Victoria's eyes welled slightly. I want it to be. Then it is. She left reluctantly, pausing at the door for one more kiss. Grayson watched from the window as her car pulled away, feeling the space she left behind like a physical thing. But she'd be back, tonight and tomorrow, and all the days stretching forward. They'd waited 8 years for this patient when the universe demanded patience. Now finally, they could stop waiting and start living. Isla returned at sunset full of stories about her afternoon with Mrs. Donnelly. She accepted Victoria's presence at dinner without question, as if the three of them eating together was simply the natural order of things. After Isla went to bed, Victoria pulled a small wrapped box from her purse. Early Christmas present. Inside 2 bracelets woven from embroidery thread in shades of purple and blue. Grayson recognized Isla's handiwork immediately, the careful knots and slightly uneven patterns. She made these for us, gave them to me 3 weeks ago and said we're family now. Tears pricked Grayson's eyes as Victoria fastened one bracelet around his wrist, then held out her own arm for him to tie the second. Such a simple gesture, child's craft barely holding together, but weighted with more meaning than any expensive jewelry. We are family, I know. I just didn't think I'd ever get to have this again. You have it, for as long as you want it. Forever then. I want it forever. They stood in his modest living room, wearing bracelets made by a 7-year-old's determined fingers, and Grayson understood this was the moment that mattered. Not the gallery or the promotion or the grand gestures. This quiet certainty, this choosing each other over and over until the choice became inevitable as breathing. Outside the window, the city glowed with evening lights. Somewhere people were making art and building empires and searching for connection in a world that often felt too large and cold. But inside this apartment, Grayson had found everything he'd been reaching for without knowing its name. 8 years ago, a woman in a red dress had asked what a painting meant. Tonight, Victoria stood in his arms wearing jeans and one of his sweatshirts, and Grayson finally had an answer. It meant that some people were worth waiting for. Some connections transcended logic and timing and all the obstacles the universe placed between them. Some love stories started with a conversation by a Rothko painting and took 8 years to complete, but completion didn't make them any less perfect. Isla's voice drifted from her bedroom, talking to her stuffed dolphin about butterflies and queens and fairy tales coming true. Victoria smiled against Grayson's shoulder, and he pressed a kiss to her hair. Thank you for not forgetting. Thank you for being unforgettable. They stood together in the fading light, two people who'd found each other twice against impossible odds. The story that had started with champagne and abstract art had finally arrived at its proper ending, which felt remarkably like a beginning.